Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello,
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds.
Dr. Jorgensen, thank you so much for entering the Nerd Zone. How are you doing today?
Oh, thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
And I know you've got a busy day, so I'm just giving everybody a heads up that we'll talk for about 20 minutes. You've got to run to a rally, and you don't want to keep people waiting. Totally understand. Would love to just start off by, if you could just give a quick introduction to yourself for people who are less familiar with you. Then we can get into talking about some of the topics of the day.
Well, some people ask me when I first got interested in politics, and my answer is I'm still not interested in politics. I'm doing this because somebody has to, because I think that we can make our own decisions better than the people in Washington. But currently, I am a senior lecturer at Clemson University, where I teach psychology. My PhD is in industrial organizational psychology, and I also have an MBA, and I've been a small business owner in the past.
Wow, eminently qualified in terms of your training and experience relative to a lot of other folks that are running. I would imagine that when you think about that background, what part of it do you think would be most useful in the White House? Is it the organizational psychology? Is it the MBA? Is it running a business?
Yeah, definitely running a business, because I know what it's like to have government interference by all the roadblocks that keep poor people and minorities and people who don't have education, people who've had trouble starting a business. I understand what it's like to start a business. And, you know, we've got a system now where instead of people getting to start at the ground and working their way up, instead, it's almost like you got to start at the top, because you have to be able to pay the lawyers and the accountants, and you got to get through all the licensing laws and zoning laws and everything like that. So it's just a shame that it's not like when my father and his father started a business in this country.
So some people who've been following the other two candidates would say, oh, well, we have a businessman in the White House already. He has talked about removing many regulations. How would you sort of evaluate that approach, and what would be different in a Jorgensen administration?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure he's ever been a small businessman since he started off with millions under his belt. So I don't know that he understands the hardship of just, you know, an everyday average person being in business. But, you know, that's the irony here is, I understand why people voted for him, because he came in, he said, look, I'm an outsider, I'm a businessman, I know how to balance a budget, I know how to cut spending. And yet he's done none of that. Now, he has reduced some regulations, however, and he has reduce some taxes, but you have to cut spending. You know, when you cut your revenues coming in, you have to cut the spending too. Now, absolutely, it's possible to cut taxes and increase revenue, but we are so far underwater. We absolutely have to cut spending. We have no choice.
So you do not subscribe to the argument that those tax cuts will not only pay for themselves, but reduce the annual deficit in the long run? I've heard that argument made.
It is possible. However, our deficit is so big, and keep in mind, it grew faster under Trump than it did even under Obama. And we've got such a huge debt. We got to pull out all the stops here. And what's funny is I ran for, I was the VP nominee in 1996. And I remember telling people, oh my gosh, we've got a $5 trillion debt. How are we ever going to work our way out of it? And now I look back at 5 trillion and think how quaint. You know, we're sitting here with 5 times that now.
Yeah.
How are we going to get out from under it? So 27 trillion, that's a lot of money. Even if reduced taxes did bring in more revenue, which yes, it can, we still got to cut spending just because we got 25 trillion there. And by the way, that's the myth of Ronald Reagan. So many people say, oh, can't we have a president like Ronald Reagan where he came in and made government smaller? But Ronald Reagan grew government every single year, year after year, for 8 straight years, because he kept increasing spending. And a lot of people said, well, but Congress never gave him a balanced budget. Well, but he willingly signed it. He didn't say, no, go back and do it again. And by the way, I'm a teacher. I know how to grade an F paper, and I would certainly grade any budget that wasn't balanced, that wasn't smaller, an F, and tell the Congress people go back and do it again.
So let's talk a little bit about regulation. I was a former Republican with strong kind of some identification with libertarian principles. However, for me, one of the things where regulation seems appropriate is around environmental protection. Mm-hmm. And that's also one of the areas where Trump has cut and slashed most of the major regulation. It's not necessarily about small businesses, but it's more about drilling in previously protected areas. What's your take on the role of government and the environment?
That people in government don't care about the environment. And I'm so glad, the environment is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I am concerned, and so many people are concerned. First of all, let me just mention, if you step back, look at the globe, you'll see wherever there's bigger government, there's more pollution. Wherever there's less government, there's less pollution. And I was in a third-party debate back in March with a woman running for the socialist ticket. And she, in her closing, said, the largest polluter on earth is the Department of Defense. And then went on to talk about how horrible corporations were. And my thought was, okay, well, if government is causing the problem, why are you going to them to help? Like, usually you don't go to the very people who are causing the problem. So let me tell you 2 stories real quick. First of all, there's a wonderful group. I encourage everybody to check them out. I just discovered them like 2 months ago. It's called PERC, P-E-R-C. They're based out of Montana. And I met 2 of the most wonderful women who work for them. And they look at free market solutions. And they gave an example of what happened in Montana, in which there was a beautiful forest, and the government was going to, basically auction off the rights to the highest bidder. So the timber company comes in and they bid, right, to chop down the trees to use. Well, there were a group of citizens who said, we really like the forest. Maybe we should bid on it. And so they bid on it, and they were quite shocked to find out that they won. They beat out the timber company in the bid. And then they thought, oh my gosh, we won. Now, how do we get the money to pay for it? Now, I wasn't surprised at all. It only took them 2 weeks to raise the money. And that shouldn't be surprising because so many people do care about the environment, especially those people who are close to it. So within 2 weeks, they raised the money. And now they saved the forest. They've got this beautiful forest where they live. But if we ended it right there, that would be a great story. But what the Montana State Legislature did is they said, well, we can't let that happen again. And they changed the laws to make sure that next time the timber company wins. So now they've got it set up so that the timber companies can always come in and buy, because that's the way government works. Government works through special interests. The way people get the power, the way they get elected, is by getting campaign contributions, which you may want to label bribes, and then they do what those people want them to do. And, you mentioned oil drilling. We had, if you recall, the oil spill, the Gulf oil spill,
Mm-hmm.
a few years back, and a lot of people were pointing there as, okay, here's why we need government, because corporations obviously don't care about the environment. But what they don't know is that the government gave them a cap on liability so that they wouldn't have the full repercussions. So had it been a free market, that company would have had to have gone to an insurance company before doing anything, before drilling, to say, hey, can you insure us? And if it had been too dangerous, if an oil spill was likely, the insurance company would have said, no, it's too risky. If they said, or what the insurance company could have said was, well, okay, it's somewhat risky. So tell you what, we will insure you. However, we don't want to pay out a claim. So we're going to go out and spot check you every week, every month, whatever, because, we like our profits. So there you have the profit motive, keeping tabs on the environment. But what happened was the legislators, the politicians were like, yeah, go ahead and drill. We don't have to pay anyway. We'll let the taxpayers foot the bill. So anytime you're working with other people's money, you're not going to get the results as people who spend their own money. And I would suggest that pretty much anybody on this planet cares about the environment more than the politicians do. All you have to do is look at their records. That they're giving $15 billion a year to fossil fuel companies. They go where the money is. That's the way government works.
So, do you feel like the current administration has done enough to make companies more accountable in that free market system, or do you feel like?
No, I still see it as crony capitalism. And, and again, I understand Trump's appeal because he was an outsider, but even though he wasn't a politician, he didn't have 50 years of, political favors running for a state house or whatever, he's still well connected. He still has friends in high places. And, I think he might have even, for instance, with bringing the troops home, which is another really important issue to me. I really think he sincerely wanted to bring the troops home, but he talks about draining the swamp. He forgets that these people in the swamp, which would be the military industrial complex in this case, that these are people he knows. These are people he's well connected to. These are, former classmates and so forth. You got to go in there and get rid of these people. You got to get rid of, for instance, the military industrial complex. And by the way, what I'm telling people is I am the true outsider. I promise you I'm not well connected. It would not hurt my feelings at all to fire all these people. These people in the Pentagon make more, first of all, they're making a huge amount of money just in their salary. But secondly, after they retire, they make more in a month than most people make in a year. Those aren't the kind of people I hang around with.
Now, some people would argue that the president has done great work by increasing spending on the military to keep the country strong and to ensure that we are secure in a very dangerous world. What would be your take about that? Because he has talked about how when he took office, there were literally like no bullets available, things like that.
Well, I'm sure there were enough bullets to defend our country. Now, were there enough bullets to defend Germany and France and Iran and Japan and everywhere else on earth? Maybe not. But, here's the thing. We keep hearing how great France is, that they get 5-week vacations. Well, maybe we'd get 5-week vacations too if we didn't pay for their military and everybody else's around the globe. We are in 160 countries around the world. We need to come home. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Absolutely, we have to defend our shores, but taxpayers in Alabama shouldn't be paying for the defense of Germany and France. And last, if it were just the money, that'd be bad enough. But it's making us less safe. And the purpose of the military is to make us more safe. All we have to do is look at 9/11. First of all, there's no justification for flying planes into buildings. And secondly, there's no guarantees you're going to stop every madman out there. However, we made it easier for bin Laden by being over there. Because bin Laden was saying, look at the Americans. They said they would be here temporarily. They're still here. They said they'd be gone by this date. They're not there. Look, they're in here taking over our laws, taking over our religion. So he was able to use that as a recruiting tool. If we hadn't been there, it would have been a lot harder for him to recruit people to attack us.
Some would suggest that we had to be in the Middle East and other places to protect the economic system that fuels our growth, and that if the Middle East is not stable, our access to a reliable supply of fuel would undermine our economy. I don't think anybody likes having American troops all over the place, but do you buy the argument that, well, they're kind of there to protect the economic infrastructure of the globe?
Yeah, well, first of all, no, I don't buy it. We've got plenty of oil here, and now we are, we are
a net exporter.
Yeah, right. We've got plenty of oil. So first of all, no. But even if you believed that, I would suggest that you would be happy that now we might not be able to get oil from there, because now we can go to alternative sources. Maybe, we'll see what works better in the free market. And by the way, my thinking is if we let the free market go towards what works, I think we'll see more nuclear energy. And it's not going to be the government monopoly nuclear energy plants of the past, which were not as safe. We've got new companies. For instance, Rolls-Royce has created a nuclear reactor that's 1/10 the size of the old ones and much safer. So we've got all these new companies competing with each other. And that's what we need is competition. Part of the reason we've got such great smartphones and computers and so forth is because Steve Jobs and Bill Gates hated each other. And they tried to outdo each other. They tried to come up with the best product at the lower price so that people would buy their product. That's what I would like to see in nuclear power. That's what I'd like to see in alternative fuels. We need people out there trying to make a profit rather than having politicians in Washington handing out money to their friends.
Let me move to an audience question from Soldier, who is a supporter of the Nerds channel, and also Andrew Yang. One of the things that Andrew encountered was a lot of criticism from AOC and some of the more kind of progressive or let's just say left of center Democrats saying, oh, the reason Yang supports basic income is he's secretly trying to reduce the size of government, and he thinks it's more efficient for tax revenue just to go directly to citizens. And so I would have assumed the Libertarian Party would be in favor of something similar. And I would love to kind of hear your thoughts.
No. That's completely opposite. No, I mean, who do you think could have come up with better computers? Steve Jobs and Bill Gates competing against each other, or having something like a monopolistic VA healthcare system or monopolistic DMV? It's competition that reduces prices, not a monopoly. And I'm going to have to make this final point and sign off. I'm so sorry again for our technical difficulties, but the value added tax, that's an insidious tax. And that's, I think, one of the worst kinds of taxes, because it's hidden, because people don't see it. At least they can look at their checks and see how, they're having money taken out of the income tax. But once you start creeping in different taxes at every level, now people don't know it, and it's basically a hidden tax. And I would like to mention one last thing before signing off, that about 75, well, actually, if you don't mind, two things. I know you started off with Andrew Yang, but I do want to point out that I was a fan of Tulsi Gabbard and her anti-war message, and I just think it's a shame that the Democratic Party has left those anti-war roots. And I would welcome any of you viewers who are anti-war to join me. I'm the only anti-war candidate. I want to bring us home from 160 different countries. And also about 75% of our volunteers are from outside the party, because people know the old system is broken. And if you want to come to my website, it's jo20.com. That's jo20.com. And I'm so grateful. And like I said, I'll be happy to come back on your show again to make up for it now that we got the problems resolved.
I love it, Joe. And thank you so much for spending time with us. I will contact your team to see if we can have a follow-up conversation. You've been so gracious in directly answering a lot of questions in a short amount of time. I can't wait to follow up and continue the dialogue.
Yes, and I would love to answer questions. So just remind them we got a late start, and I want to come back for the Q&A, that your viewers deserve to have their questions answered, because the other two guys aren't answering questions. So
I appreciate it, Dr. Jorgensen. With that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Joe, can I get a goodbye, nerds from you?